Hi, I'm Carolyn Burt, and I'm a scratchboard artist, one of the artists at Splash Gallery, and I'd like to take you on a studio tour. So I'd first like to start with my very favorite piece. This actually is hanging in my house, and this is my granddaughter, who is in my great-grandmother's afternoon tea dress, and everything in this picture has meaning to me. The lamp is a gift from my wedding gift from my parents, and the blanket down here was a gift from my grandmother, who hand knit this and put the satin ribbon in. And so the challenge with this piece was the time it took to do all the embroidery and patterns. It was really challenging, and the skin on the picture. But this is my favorite one. I'll start with that, and I'll take you upstairs to my studio. Welcome to my studio. I have a nice big space. I'm getting ready for a window for summer for Splash. And I like to work over here by the window, and I have lots of my artwork here. But I'm going to take you into the storage area first so that you can see where I store some of my artwork. I've got lots of different artwork, large pieces, small pieces of scratchboard. And take you over here to this particular, and I'm going to try to set up the camera so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I'd like to show you some of my scratchboard. Try to get it in the viewfinder. All my scratchboard are done from reference photos of my own. This one is the flamingo from Florida, and scratchboard is an engraving process. It starts with a masonite board covered with white clay, covered with black India ink, and then I use sharp tools to take the black off for the white to show through. Then I can add color like I've done here in the cherries. And then once it's finished, it's sprayed with an acrylic Krylon spray. I also do what's called clayboard, and this one is a combination of clayboard and scratchboard technique with the trilliums. And I like to do the sea turtles. They're one of my favorites with lots of detail in them. And dandelions, you can use simple subjects like dandelions, make a great subject for scratchboard. And let's see, the little wren. Birds work well for scratchboard because you've got all the detail in the feathers. And one of my favorites is my little eaglet. They're so cute. And the mallard duck. And a backyard visitor, my raccoon friend, it used to come. I've got several of the raccoons. He tended to be a good subject, visiting our backyard frequently. So you can do a variety of subjects. I'm going to take you back into the other room now to do scratchboard. And these are some works in progress. This one's a little different because I've added gold foil, and I call it Acceptance. And if you look at the four crows, and then if you look down over here, you see a little wren, and they are accepting him on their branch. Then I can do some simple black and whites like Randy Oxford, a local musician. And the black and whites can be very dramatic. I like being able to do just black and white. Or I can add the color like I've done in this one of the children playing in the Capitol Lake fountains there, right in the park there. And my ram, this was a challenge because I had to draw out a grid and hand draw and chalk the ram onto the board, and that took a while. And I've got some ribbons for my artwork. And over here I've got some ribbons from the Southwest Washington Fair and Thurston County Fair. And this particular piece was of my mother in the 1940s, and I decided to frame it with the doilies to add to a little interest to it. And my workspace is right here, and I'm going to set up the camera again so that you can see what I'm doing and hopefully see it well. Let's see if I can get the camera set up here. Turn it the other direction and hope that it's facing down to the table. I'm going to check it real quick to make sure that it's showing my workspace, which it seems to be. Okay. So I'm going to take you through kind of the steps to do a scratch board with my demo pieces. First, I start with a picture. This one happens to be a barn cat of a friend of ours. And I start by either drawing it in chalk or using some tracing paper. And then I take and very carefully take my sharp tool, usually the number 11 blade, and just very lightly outline my piece so that it doesn't show up unless you really look closely at it. And once I've got this done, then I start adding in more detail and more. Using my sharp piece, I can start adding in the little hairs in the areas that I want on the cat. And I can also use a tool called a fiber brush, which can make a soft kind of white and makes it really good for those kind of fuzzy areas that aren't showing really individual hairs, but more of a fuzzy area. And then I can add color to it. Once I've got it all white, I can go back in and add color with either the Winsor Newton inks. Oops, there goes the camera. Put it back up again. I can go back in with the Winsor Newton inks and add the color details that I want and re-scratch to get the different layers of color. Now I'm going to show you just a few tools. I like to use the scalpel, which is a number 11 blade scalpel, and I like this. I use the X-Acto knives, but sometimes the scalpels work better because they're lighter for me to handle. And I also use the curve blade scalpel, which takes off bigger areas of the black for the white to show through. I use a variety of tattoo needles, from very, very fine to get real fine detail. If I want just very fine lines like whiskers or something, I can do that with the tattoo needle. Or if I want little parallel lines to fill in an area, just kind of give it a gray tone, I can use the little parallel lines for the gray tones. I have just a single drawing tool that makes just a single line. I have some scratch board tools, and these have to be sharpened frequently, or blades change because they do dull, but they work well too. And then some special tools to make little lines. So this one makes, if I want to do grasses, it makes lines that kind of look like grass, or this one makes lines that make it look like fur or grass again, fur, hair, whatever. It makes a good tool to use. And I've got a real variety of tools that I use. Anything sharp that takes off the black will work. I'm going to turn the camera around so that you can see some things that I'm working on. The camera off the stand. And I'm working on a regular scratch board, which again is a masonite board covered with white clay, covered with black India ink. Working on this fish, the trout, and then I'm also working on some clayboard pieces. And clayboard is kind of a fun process because you take a board and you do the background first. Clayboard means that it's just the clay, the white clay. And I put a piece of glass out, I put my inks out, and I take the the board and I swish it around on the glass, lift it up, and have kind of a random pattern of the color that I want. So sometimes it's nice not to have just a black background. And then I can take and paint in black where I want my design to be with the India ink. I usually use the Winsor Newton India ink or the Scratchboard ink. And I can take my sharp tool and start making little marks to make the feathers on the heron show up. And if I want to highlight an area, let's say there's an area here that I want to highlight with a little bit more, I can use the rounded tool and it'll take off just a little bit more and highlight an area. So the clayboard is a fun one to do. I've got several in progress. I've got my heron, I've got some birds, I've got an octopus and some jellyfish, and then I've got my regular scratchboard I'm working on. And again, you have to think a little differently when you're doing scratchboard because you have to think about leaving the black. For instance, for the spots on the fish, I have to think about, leaving those black spots as I'm doing the little tiny marks. And I'm starting real light, and then I get heavier as I go and pulling out the areas that I want and adding color. And you can see down here on the rock, I've added a little bit of color and then scratched out some white. There's going to be some reflection on that. And you use a variety of strokes. You can use cross-hatching. You can use the stippling to get different effects that you want to get for the textures on the rocks. So that's a really quick lesson in scratchboard. I hope to start giving lessons eventually. I've got a nice big space here that I can give lessons if I wanted. If you want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me through Splash Gallery or checking out my website at www.carolynburtstudio.com. My phone number is 253-820-2129. And I'm going to end with a couple pieces that I'm working on. One is my turtle piece, which is a big piece, and I'm still working on all that coral and the reef area. So eventually it'll be done and probably in Splash Gallery. And then my favorite, which may not be in the gallery, but is one I'm working on, is of my two granddaughters dancing at my wedding. And the challenge there is the skin and the satin of the dress and the textures in the dress and her hair flying. But I think it'll come out really nice once it's all done. So again, thank you for coming to my studio tour, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, feel free to contact me. Bye.